This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live.
Welcome to the 2025-2026 Goal Setting Workshop here on Saturday Morning Breakfast on Teachers Talk Radio.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live. Tune in live at ttradio.org, or to join in the conversation, download the Podbean app and search Teachers Talk Radio. Follow the hashtag TTRadio. Tune in, talk it out with Teachers Talk Radio.
A very good morning to you. This is Saturday Breakfast here on Teachers Talk Radio. It is Saturday, the 30th of August, 2025, and you are here with me, your host, Darren Lester. We have got a bit of a new sound setup here in the Saturday Morning Breakfast studio this week. I've been away for the last couple of weeks trying to sort all of the audio issues out, but hopefully, fingers crossed, we are good for today. Now, normally we have a bit of a chat before we get into the topic. That's kind of how the routine goes here on Saturday Morning Breakfast, but this week we're actually going to dive straight in because I want to make sure that we are really making the most of our full 90 minutes to do our goal setting today. So we are going to be looking at what we want to achieve over the 2025-2026 academic year, breaking it down into those steps in order to achieve it, and thinking about how we make sure that we record that achievement so that we stay accountable to ourselves as well as to other people. So there are a couple of things that you're going to need to do today. At no point am I going to compel you to engage with the show directly. So if you are listening live, you are more than welcome to text in the answers to any of the questions that I ask you. If you are in the Podbean app right now, you can speak to me just by inputting your message right there in the chat window. I will read it out live on air and we can engage that way. But I understand that goal setting can be a very personal thing, particularly with some of the different questions that I'm going to ask you today. So you do not have to engage with me as your host directly. I'm going to ask questions. I want you to think about them, but you do not need to answer them out loud, as it were. You can if you want to, but you do not have to. What I am going to suggest that you do, though, is write your answers down somewhere. And there will be different points in the show where we kind of have a bit of a musical interlude and you have the opportunity to write things. So you can grab a notebook. If you have a notebook going, you can grab a planner. You can download the workbook that I've actually created specifically for this show. It's available in a couple of places. You can go to the Teachers Talk Radio LinkedIn account, and it is in a post that has been posted there. It's also in a post on my own LinkedIn account. In fact, that's the one that Teachers Talk Radio reposted. And it's also on the brand new Saturday Breakfast Show Substack that I have launched. So there are a few places that you can go to grab the workbook that I've created to go along with this workshop. That will be available forever. So if it's not Saturday the 30th of August 2025 for you, and you are listening to this on playback, that's absolutely fine. You can still go and get the workbook if you want it, just to kind of help guide you through this goal setting process. The reason, though, that I'm not making the workbook mandatory is because I do actually believe in the aesthetics of goal setting. I am, full disclosure, I am one of those teachers that has a horde of notebooks um, dotted just about everywhere. Some of them are, well, a lot of them, to be fair, are complete. Some of them are half filled. Some of them are, in inverted commas, too pretty to use. But I'm definitely a teacher who loves all of the back to school stationery sales. And I think that when you are engaging with goals, when you are engaging with goal setting, it's really important to want to actually engage with it. It's really important to want to go back to it. So for me, it is actually really important to do my goal setting in a notebook that is dedicated to that, in a journal that is dedicated to that. I can break out my stickers, I can break out my washi tapes, I can break out my highlighters, my pens, whatever I need, um, because I think it is very easy to go into the new school year with very good intentions, setting your goals, and then not ever going back to them until the end of the school year when you've got a bit more time and you realize that you have never actually done anything to work towards them. Whereas if you have got a system that is A, easy to use, and B, makes you want to use it, you are more likely to revisit those goals. You are more likely to actually do something about them. The second reason that I think it's really important to write your goals down is because the process of thinking happens through writing. This is something that I've been exploring in my doctoral studies recently. We've been told throughout our course, never read anything without writing a reflection on it. And I've come to realize how absolutely true that is, because I can process so much more on paper than I can just in my head. And it means that I don't have to retain it, because we know as teachers, we are busy people. We've got a lot going on. We've got a very heavy cognitive load as it is. So if you've written something down, you don't need to worry about retaining that information, about keeping it in your head. The third reason that I think it's really important for you to have your own system for writing down your goals is ironically because many schools impose a system. So lots of schools will tell you where they want you to record your CPD, where they want you to record your professional development, where they want you to record your professional goals. And because it has to be a one size fits all system, because it has to be a standardized, this is what we use at this school and everybody uses the same, it is very often a plain system. Sometimes it can be an overly complicated system, depending on what your school is buying into. And that itself can be quite off-putting in terms of the goal-making process. So if you start by doing your goal setting in a way that makes sense to you, in a way that is aesthetically pleasing to you, in a way that is going to get you engaged with the actual goal setting, it's not going to matter so much how your school wants you to set it out, because you can go and fill in the form, you can go and fill in the web page, whatever it is that they want you to do, using the information that you have done for yourself. And there's going to be a lot of focus in today's show about making this about yourself. So I'm going to give you a couple of minutes now while we jump over to Joe with the news. Please do still listen to Joe with the news, because I always think that Joe's news is one of the highlights of the show every single week. But while you are getting this week's news, track down whatever it is you want to use to record your goals, be it a notebook, be it a Word document, be it the workbook. Again, you can grab that from LinkedIn or from Substack, whatever it may be. Go and grab what it is that you need in order to really engage with the goal setting, and I will see you back here after the news.
Get a head start on your fresh start with Bloomsbury Education. With 30% off all our books till the end of September, this back-to-school sale is your chance to stock up on CPD titles, classroom resource banks, lesson ideas, and practical solutions to every teacher's pain points. Browse titles on sale from the Like a Ninja series, The Week Junior, and Let's Talk Picture Books. Perfect for the new school year. From leadership to inclusivity and maths to mental health, Bloomsbury Education has books for every step of your teaching journey. Welcome back to school at bloomsbury.com/back to school sale.
Over 7,500 primary schools are already using Capel Primary to boost confidence in teaching foundation subjects. Our expert-created curriculum planning, lessons and CPD are here to support and upskill you, whether you're a subject lead or classroom teacher. If you've got knowledge gaps in art, music, computing or beyond, we've got you covered. Head to capelprimary.com and empower your teaching today.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Don't miss out. Level up your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and this is Teachers Talk Radio News.
Schools Week says that the handover of the administration of teachers' pensions to a new provider has been delayed until next summer. Capita has run the teachers' pension scheme for almost 3 decades, but was due to hand it over to Indian IT firm TCS in October of this year. Capita missed out on the £233 million 10-year contract when governments re-tendered in 2023. However, the Department for Education has now confirmed that the final handover has been pushed back to summer 2026. A spokesperson did not explain the reason for the delay, nor give further details, but did state it was vital that after almost 30 years of running the teachers' pension scheme, Capita's handover to Tata Consultancy Services is a smooth one. The spokesperson went on to say that the change of date will not impact any pensions or benefit entitlements. TCS and Capita were approached for comment but have not yet responded. FE Week reports that Ellen Thinnison, who is Chief Executive of North East College Group, has been appointed as the next FE Commissioner. Thinnison currently heads up Education Partnership North East, but will succeed Sheila LeGrave from January 2026. LeGrave has held the post of FE Commissioner since 2021 and was due to end her tenure in October, but will remain in post while Thinnison serves out her notice. Thinnison told FE Week, "It's a great privilege to be appointed at this crucial time when skills are vital to delivering the government's mission for growth and opportunity." Education Secretary Bridget Phillipson said, "I am delighted to appoint Ellen to the vital role of FE Commissioner." Phillipson also thanked Sheila LeGrave for her work in the role. The FE Commissioner role was introduced in 2013 as a key advisor to ministers in the Department for Education. The Commissioner intervenes in struggling colleges, where visits turn into published reports which assesses quality and financial health, as well as the existing governance and leadership. The 4-day week role comes with £140,000 a year salary and is a 3-year term. The TES covers a poll which suggests that almost 1/2 of teachers fear looking like cheats when using artificial intelligence in the classroom. The survey by YouGov says 44% feel they are not doing their job properly when using AI for core teaching tasks. The results come after the Department for Education released guidance for schools on using AI, which it said can cut teachers' workload. The government has pledged to invest an extra £1 million to accelerate the development of AI tools to help teachers with marking and generate detailed, tailored feedback for individual students. The survey suggests that 52% of schools now officially adopted AI, a rise from 31% in 2024. In the survey, teachers expressed concerns about feeling intimidated by students' superior AI knowledge, and were worried about the growing gap between students' AI abilities and their own. However, the survey also found that many of those who reported using AI said they felt less stressed as a result. Almost one half of teachers reported they had received no support with AI from their schools. More details and statistics can be found online in the TES magazine. Schools Week reports that the government holidays, activities and food programme has been extended for another 3 years, with £600 million of funding being awarded. The scheme was piloted between 2018 and 2020 and rolled out nationwide in 2021, and it pays for free clubs and lunches for poorer pupils during school holidays. The DFE has said it will run until at least March 2029. And Education Secretary Bridget Phillipson said, "Giving every child the best start in life is my number one priority." Councils have welcomed the announcement. More details on Schools Week online. Finally, the BBC reports that in the USA, the FBI is investigating a wave of active shooter hoaxes at US universities, which have triggered chaotic armed police responses as students return to campus for the new semester. Since the start of the new school year, nearly a dozen universities have been hit by swatting hoaxes, leading to panic as students, parents and faculty flee. In a statement issued in response to the latest wave of hoaxes, the FBI encouraged the public to remain vigilant and immediately report anything they consider suspicious. Last year, a British man became the first in the UK to be charged with committing a swatting hoax after police in the state of Maryland responded to a fake hostage call and shot the victim of the hoax with plastic bullets. The FBI reports that several young men have now been jailed for calling in such hoaxes. This has been Teachers Talk Radio News with Joe Fox.
Thank you, Joe. Loved your input as always. All right, so hopefully now you are set up to start thinking in writing about your goals. Before we do that, though, I want to think about why goal setting is important for us. We know smart targets, blah, 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 but I actually want to get to the nitty-gritty of why we actually should be setting goals, and not just setting them, but keeping on top of them, doing that, returning to the goals that I was talking about before we went over to Joe. And kind of as I was thinking about this, I came up with 5 different domains, really, as to why I think goal setting is important for us. The first is that it gives us clarity in what is a very busy profession. One of the reasons that we tend to let our own goals go by the wayside is because there is too much to do. Like I said when I was exploring why we should be writing our goals down earlier, we have a huge cognitive load in our job. Just surviving the day-to-day is really, really difficult. And without clear goals, it's really easy to get lost in where we are investing our time and where we are investing our energy. I'm going to put a pin in my own personal opinions about AI for a second, which will surprise anybody that has heard me rant about AI over the past few months, and say that, Joe reported just then on how the government is planning on encouraging us to use AI tools to make our marking load lighter, to improve the quality of that feedback as well. That should gain us some time. But what are we actually going to do with that gained time? Is it gaining us some time so that we can have yet more playground duties, so that we can be out welcoming the children at 8:30 in the morning before we go straight into class? What are we actually going to be doing with that extra time? Because time is a premium for us. If it's going to help us to have more time to achieve our own goals, fine. I still don't like AI. I still have ethical reasons why I think it's wrong, but okay, that time is gained. I'm all for that. But it's about making sure that we are being deliberate with how we use our time. I'm huge into deliberate practice. I don't think that in our profession we should be doing anything without having a very clear reason for it. And that includes our goal setting. We shouldn't be goal setting just because the school makes us. We shouldn't be goal setting just because it's part of our, the English word has escaped me. The performance management. There we go. Performance management cycle. We need to make sure that we are goal setting to maximize the time that we have for working. That's number one. Number two, related to that, comes from a really nice expression that exists in French. They say métro boulot dodo. Métro, you go to work, you take the metro. Boulot, you're at work. Dodo, you go to sleep. Faire dodo, to play dodo, is a French idiom for going to sleep. And it's the equivalent of the English metaphor of being on the hamster wheel. So we spend a lot of time on the day-to-day nitty-gritty in our profession. We spend a lot of time firefighting. We spend a lot of time not actually making any progress forward because we are always doing the same tasks. So by being very deliberate about our goals, not just in setting them, but in revisiting them, in making sure that they are working for us, in making the tweaks as we go along, in actively engaging with them, we can break that cycle. And we can make sure that we don't get lost in that nitty-gritty day-to-day. We can make sure that we are actually doing something purposeful for our careers. Which brings me on to the third one, professional growth. Now, it seems a bit obvious, doesn't it, to say that setting career goals helps us to sharpen our skills, to experiment with strategies, to prepare for leadership roles, all of that career progression stuff. But I think sometimes in teaching, there is a slight vilification for that. If you break away from the everything is all about the kids narrative, you don't get the same kind of support. And I think very often teachers, again, get caught up in everything being for the kids, everything being about that day-to-day métro boulot dodo experience, and forgetting that we actually do this job because we need a job and because most other jobs do come with some kind of career path, career progression. Even if you don't want to climb the traditional ladder, if you don't want to go from ECT to head of department to senior management to deputy head, possibly then on to head teacher. If you are quite happy being a classroom teacher, you can still have career progression. But because it's all about the kids, no one is going to hand that career progression to you because everyone else is focused on the kids. So you're the one that has to be focused on your own career. And it's not wrong to do that. And I say that because it took me a very long time to realize that it was okay for me to be concerned about my career and for me to actually want to do CPD courses that would benefit me, that would help me to further my own career. And that's, again, one of the reasons that I'm doing this show right now is because something that I've realized over the past year, since taking on the head of department role, since changing schools, is I don't have the September scaries because I am goal setting, because my career is now my career. Yes, I want my children to succeed. Yes, I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure my children succeed. That is, after all, my job. But in a year, 2 years, 5 years, however long it may be, when all of the children I'm currently teaching have left, and they've probably forgotten about me because who remembers their Latin teacher? Let's be honest. I'm still going to be here. Hopefully, I'm still going to be here in 5 years on a Saturday morning, talking to you about all sorts of stuff. And if I'm not consciously, actively engaged in my own career development, in my own goal setting, then nothing is actually going to change. Goal setting is about personal well-being. Our energy and our well-being directly affects our classroom. So if you are a bit antsy about doing anything for yourself, just remember that you can't pour from an empty cup. In order for your classroom to run effectively, you've got to be running effectively. Setting personal goals around rest, around hobbies, around health will help to work into your professional targets. That's why if you've downloaded the workbook, and again, you can grab a copy either from the Teachers Talk Radio LinkedIn account, from my personal LinkedIn, or from my Saturday morning breakfast Substack. There is a whole section on setting personal goals as well as professional ones, because the two do tie together. I'm sure there are teachers out there who have managed a perfect work-life balance, who switch off at 5 and then don't think about school until they arrive at 7:30 the next morning. That's not me. I personally can't do that. My whole life is wrapped up in my teaching. A big part of my personal identity is wrapped up in my professional identity. It's why I'm here on a Saturday morning talking to you about goal setting. And so for me, it's been important to accept that that's just who I am as a teacher. And it's okay that that's who I am as a teacher, just that it's okay that a few of my colleagues are the opposite and they've got that balance worked out really, really nicely, and to embrace that, to lean into it. And finally, it helps us to sustain motivation. Goals provide milestones for us to celebrate, and acknowledging those milestones, acknowledging that progress, builds momentum and resilience. Now, nothing that I've said in the last 10 minutes is new to anybody who is listening. How many times have you stood in front of your tutor group and said those exact same things about them? One of the worst things about our profession is the kind of implicit hypocrisy that we have, because we do all of these things with our young people, and we tell our young people how they need to have goals, how they need to rest, how they need to have hobbies. And then we just don't bother with it ourselves. And if we're going to get our young people to take their goals seriously, if we're not going to just do goal setting in tutor time as a tick box exercise because the head of year 8 tells us that we have to, but because we believe it's important for our young people, we've got to show them that it's important to us as well, because it is important to us as well. All right, let's move on now then to the practical portion of the workshop. We're going to spend the next hour-ish just kind of thinking about your goals, setting some goals, reflecting on your practice, reflecting on what you want to happen in the next year. Now, again, I'm going to ask a lot of questions. All of these questions are ones that can be found in the workbook. So if you don't have the workbook, that's fine. You can still engage in this process. You just open up your notebook, open up your word processing document, whatever it is you need to do, and you can work that way. If you do want to answer any of the questions, if you don't mind having a chat, if you want some advice, if you want to pool some of the collective wisdom of the audience, and you're listening live via Podbean, then again, you can text me straight into the Podbean app. I will be more than happy to read your message out on air, and we can brainstorm some ideas that way. But you don't have to. Goal setting is personal. This is actually one of the other reasons why it's really good to do your goal setting outside of inset time. Because if you first think about your goals for the year when you are sitting in front of the school's pro forma, you are probably just going to write down what the school wants to hear, what you think the school wants to hear. Whereas if you're brainstorming them now, and then you go into your performance management meeting on Tuesday, and you sit with your HOD and your HOD says, okay, what are your goals for the year? And you've already thought about them. You can also think about how you can make it appropriate for whatever the school pro forma is. So again, you can tie those two things together. All right. So activity number 1, I'm going to give you, it's going to be just over a minute, I think, is the length of the musical interlude that I have prepared, that I hope is prepared if my mouse is going to work. And during that musical interlude, I want you to think about your journey into teaching. If you're not a teacher, because I'm aware that actually not everybody who listens to Saturday Morning Breakfast is a teacher. We're all involved in working with children in some ways, but not everyone is a teacher. If you're not a teacher, then you can think about how you are, how you got into your profession, whatever your profession is. But spend a minute thinking, and remember, by thinking I mean writing, because we think through writing, about your journey into teaching. Because no matter where you are in your journey, whether you are an ECT1 about to step into your first classroom on Monday, whether you are like me going into year, I can't remember whether it's 18 or 19, but it's some ridiculous number. Whether this is your final year teaching, I saw a going back to school, first day of school social media post the other day that was somebody's last first day of school, because this is her year of retirement. It's always good to remind yourself of why you got into the profession to begin with. So think about what inspired you to become a teacher. Think about, was there a specific person? Was it one of your own teachers? Was it a parent? Are you a child of teachers? Was there a specific moment? What was it that prompted that decision to apply for the BEd, the BA with QTS, the PGCE? And is that motivation still relevant to you today? Is that person's influence still important enough for you to be in the profession? If yes, fantastic. If no, consider why not. So just a minute to brainstorm some different ideas. Oh, my music file failed. Of course it did. Let's see if this one works. Nope. Oh, we try. A man tries. Okay, so I'm actually just going to tell you my story. And while I'm talking, you can, again, reflect on your own ideas, pay more attention to yourself than to me. I just don't want to leave any dead air, is all. So I got into teaching kind of by accident, I think, as many people seem to. I was a stage professional. I was a performer before I got into teaching. Now, bearing in mind that I did actually go pretty much straight from school into my BEd. So my BEd was my first degree. I was already performing. I was already earning my money as a performer, and that was my goal. I was going to be a stage actor. I thought that I would branch into TV at some point. I did some TV. I ended up not liking it, which is why I ended up sticking to the stage. But I was on that path. And then it was my mum, actually, who said to me, well, hold on, what happens when the roles dry up? What happens when you're not acting anymore? And I didn't have a backup plan. And as it's very, very sad, but as we hear quite often, teaching was my backup plan because I thought, oh, I have these skills. I can teach them. And I actually went into primary teaching. I trained to be a primary teacher because I thought that was where my performance skills would be best suited. You know, working with the young children. I had done some things with a theatre troupe where we had gone round and performed in school assemblies and then done drama workshops with the kids afterwards. And I'd enjoyed that. So I trained to work with very young children. And then 2007 hit. So I graduated in 2007. Recessions were hitting. Roles were not coming up. But the school where I had done my final year placement needed a new French teacher. I spoke French fluently. I had done, degree French modules alongside my B.Ed, which ultimately then turned into a languages degree. And so I took that job. And now, 18, 19, however many years later it is, I'm still in that job, albeit very differently, because I no longer teach primary. I focused on languages, and I now teach whatever languages I can speak, I teach them. But yeah, that was kind of how I got into it. Now, obviously, that's not my motivation today. I'm not worried about not getting acting jobs anymore because I gave up the idea of performing full time many, many years ago. I do still perform occasionally, but not often. So I can't use that as my motivation anymore. But I don't use that as my motivation anymore either. I've realized that my motivation these days is the fact that I am interested in language. I personally like language. I think language is useful. No, I think language gives us positivity. I think language gives us intellectual curiosity, and I want to share that with my young people. So that's my motivation, is the fact that I love language. I love how language works. I love modern and ancient language equally, and I want to share that love with my young people. That was longer than the minute interlude I was going to give you with some music, but hopefully that's kind of modelled how you go about thinking about your journey into teaching and how your journey has changed. Because unless you are an ECT1, your motivation is not the same as it was when you went immediately into teaching. Even if you're an ECT2, over the year of your ECT1, something will have changed. And it's really important for you to revisit that. Okay, so now that we've thought about your motivation, I want you to think about what matters most to you in your work. I don't want you to answer this question performatively. I don't want you to answer this question in terms of what do I want my line manager to think is most important to me? What do I want the Saturday Breakfast audience to think is the most important thing to me? I want you to be very honest when you're answering this question. And again, this is why I'm not asking you to share any of these answers, because it's really important for you to be incredibly honest with yourself as you're answering them. Okay, so I'm going to ask you 3 questions. And then while we are hearing from the sponsors of today's show, I would like you again to think about your answers. And by thinking, we are writing, because it's through writing that we do our very best thinking. Okay. So the 3 questions that I'm going to ask you are, when I think about the moments in which I feel most fulfilled in my job, what do they look like? Second question, what do I want my pupils to take away from the time in my classroom? And third, what do I want my colleagues to say about me in my leaving speech? When it's time for me to move on from my current school, what would I like my colleagues to say about me in that speech when I'm leaving? So think about those, because those questions will answer the big one of what matters to me in my work, what is important to me.
Get a head start on your fresh start with Bloomsbury Education. With 30% off all our books till the end of September, this back-to-school sale is your chance to stock up on CPD titles, classroom resource banks, lesson ideas, and practical solutions to every teacher's pain points. Browse titles on sale from the Like a Ninja series, The Week Junior, and Let's Talk Picture Books, perfect for the new school year. From leadership to inclusivity and maths to mental health, Bloomsbury Education has books for every step of your teaching journey. Welcome back to school at bloomsbury.com/back-to-school sale.
Over 7,500 primary schools are already using Capel Primary to boost confidence in teaching foundation subjects. Our expert-created curriculum planning, lessons and CPD are here to support and upskill you, whether you're a subject lead or classroom teacher. If you've got knowledge gaps in art, music, computing or beyond, we've got you covered. Head to capelprimary.com and empower your teaching today.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Don't miss out. Level up your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles.
Okay, now if we're moving too quickly, because there's a lot to fit into an hour and a half, especially if I'm going to go off on tangents and tell you stories, you can always go back to this. Remember, goal setting is a constant process. Okay, so it's not a case of 10:30 hits, we play the closing jingle, and you are done. You're going to keep revisiting this folder. You're going to keep revisiting this notebook. You are going to make sure that everything that you write today is reread, is renoted, is edited, is scribbled on throughout the year. So if you don't get a chance to finish any of the questions today, that's completely okay. You can always revisit them another time. And if you need a reminder of them, again, you can either download the workbook from LinkedIn, from Substack, or download the show when it goes live as a podcast at a little bit after 10:30 by the time it's processed, and then you can just listen back to the questions as many times as you need to. All right, now I'm going to move on to your values. So this is, if you're using the workbook, this is on page 7. I want you to think about what values are most present in the way you plan your lessons, in the way you interact with your students, and in the way you collaborate with your colleagues. If you are an ECT, if you're going into ECT1, think about what you want those things to be. What kind of colleague do you want to be? What kind of lesson planner do you plan on being? And think about your school practice and how you think you can change based on that. I want you to think about what values you want to live out more fully in your teaching. I kind of generated a list of different values. You could use some of these if you want to, but you don't have to. I came up with creativity, equity, curiosity, discipline, kindness, patience, excellence, fun, responsibility, growth, compassion, integrity, adaptability, justice, and resilience. So those were just a few that I came up with as I was brainstorming ideas. You don't have to use any of those. And again, pick the ones that are actually important to you, not the ones that you think should be important. We're not performing teacherhood here. We're not playing teachers. We are being ourselves. We are cultivating our careers. Because I very nearly didn't put discipline on that list, because I know a lot of people are going to say, oh, I want to be a good disciplinarian, because behavior management is something that we are always working on. Behavior management is something that there are always courses on. And if you need to pick a goal for the year, behavior management is quite an easy one to choose, because regardless of how good a disciplinarian you are, there's always going to be one kid that is disruptive, one kid that is off task. And so there's always a way there to work on. But discipline might not be important to you. You might be one of those teachers that believes that you don't need discipline if you've built good relationships. You might be one of those teachers who believes you don't need to worry about discipline if your lessons are fun, because it's the fun that keeps them on task. There's no right answer to this. It's about what is important to you. Because when you are teaching in a way that aligns with who you actually are and what you actually think is important, you're going to do your very best job. And it took me a long time to realize that. It took me ages to realize that actually what was important to me personally was not putting kids in detention because they forgot to bring their homework. If they brought it to me the next day or the day after next, then that's fine for me. It wasn't important to me that a child was making eye contact with me when they were talking. As long as they were engaging, I was happy. What was important to me was whether children enjoyed their time in my lessons, that they didn't look and see French or Chinese or Japanese or German on their timetable and think, oh God, we got Mr. Lester. I really don't want to go to school today. And that even if they chose not to take any of my languages for GCSE, as long as they took a language, it didn't matter. As long as they learned from me that language was important, it didn't matter whether it was mine, because it's not an ego contest. It's not about, 100% of my year 9 class are taking French next year. How many from your class? Because I don't care how many from somebody else's class. As long as each child is taking a language, the one that they want to study, that is what is important to me. And it was when I embraced my own values and what I felt was important that I realized I was more authentic as a teacher. And it was when I felt more authentic as a teacher that I felt happier as a teacher. And I'm going to be very honest. One of the reasons that I don't have the September scaries about Monday is, well, probably because I didn't get the summer break. So I'm just still going. But it's also because in my current context, I can focus on the stuff that is important to me. Because, in an online school, I don't have to worry so much about behavior management. I am in contact with parents just as much as I'm in contact with kids. And so it's very easy for me to say, Sarah hasn't handed in any assignments for a couple of weeks. Is everything all right? Because every email that I send to Sarah is copied into Sarah's mum anyway. So she knows. And so because those things that I didn't want to put my energy into fighting have been removed for me, I can put my energy into places that I believe matter. Which is another reason why behavior specifically shouldn't be an individual classroom teacher's responsibility, but should be the responsibility of higher ups. There should be a deputy head in charge of behavior who is non-teaching and doesn't have an office that has a cart, a Segway, and goes around the school making sure that behavior is okay so that teachers can teach. But again, those are my values, those are my opinions. If you are a practitioner who believes that discipline is important and you pride yourself on your discipline, that's okay too. You can be that teacher. That can be a value that guides your practice. We are all different as teachers. It's weird, isn't it? Because our kids probably think we're a monolith. We are just the teachers. But teachers as a group are far more distinct than actors as a group were back when I was in the theatre full time. So be true to yourself. Oh, I'm full of the cliches today, aren't I? I'm loving it. I feel like anybody who has ever done an inset. Now, if you're working through the workbook, you will find that after you've brainstormed those values, I ask you to choose your top 3. I love the power of 3. I love the number 3. There's a lot of psychology research that has been done into the concept of the power of 3 and how it does something to our brain. I'm not a psychologist, so I'm not going to pretend that I know about this, but I do know as a linguist that the power of 3 is very important. If you listen to politicians, if you listen to therapists, if you listen to anybody who tries to place himself in a position of power, they will use the rule of 3. They will repeat things 3 times. They will say the same thing thrice, but in different ways, kind of like I did just then. Because there is something psychologically that makes us more susceptible to that idea if we hear it 3 times. If we look at religion, the number 3 is very important, particularly if we go back and we look at the pre-Christian religions in Europe. If we look at Hellenismos, if we look at Religio Romana, if we look at those, in inverted commas, pagan religions, the number 3 was very important. It occurs quite a lot in spellcasting. It occurs quite a lot in scriptures. It occurs in defixio, in curse tablets, because there is something psychologically powerful about this number 3. So I've done lots of 3s throughout the workbook. And the first one is to come up with your top 3 teaching values. 3 is a small number. It's very easy for you to focus on 3 things. But again, more importantly, psychologically, 3 is important. I bang on about this quite a lot, but when I was training, we were taught that it took 3 good things to negate 1 bad thing in a day. So if you tell a child off, you've then got to praise them 3 times just for them to have had a neutral lesson. I think that's really powerful, and I think that really sort of drives home how important this number 3 is. Okay, we're going to move on to your strengths and your growth areas. Now, notice that we haven't set any goals yet. We're almost an hour into the show, and we've not actually set any goals. This is because goals are not arbitrary. Goals should come from who you currently are, who you want to be, and what that gap is. And again, that gap is really important. I talk about this on the show quite a lot as well. I was taught that that gap is your self-esteem. The wider the gap between the person you currently are and the person you want to be, or the person you perceive yourself to currently be and the person you want to be, the lower your self-esteem. So one of the things that we can do by bridging that gap through our goal setting is we can raise our self-esteem. Now, granted, not everybody needs their self-esteem raised, but it is very important to have high self-esteem, especially if that's a value that you want to teach to your children, because you want to model that. So let's think then about your strengths and your growth areas. We'll start with strengths. Strengths are always a good place to start. And remember that because we're going to think about growth as well, and keeping in mind that it takes 3 positive things to neutralize 1 negative thing, I want you to be very liberal with your strengths. I want you to come up with a huge list of them, as many as you can possibly think of. Because I don't want you to come away from the goal setting workshop this morning thinking that you're a rubbish teacher because you've come up with more areas for development than you have strengths. So literally anything that you think is a strength, I want you to jot down. Be careful with this, because it does need to be things that you think are strengths. By all means, take on board things that colleagues have told you, that mentors have told you, that pupils have told you, but they've got to come from within you. And I will say, just as a caveat, again, mostly for any ECTs listening, but also I think quite often the more experienced of us need this reminder as well. What a pupil thinks is a strength of a teacher is not necessarily a strength of a teacher. A pupil may think that their teacher is great because they play lots and lots of Kahoot. But if they're playing lots and lots of Kahoot just because it's a bit of a time filler and there's no actual pedagogical reason for Kahoot to be being played, that's not a teaching strength. That means you need to work on your planning to make sure that you don't need to keep filling time. Which is not to say that all Kahoots are that way. I use, not Kahoot so much anymore, but I use Blookit a lot because I do believe in its pedagogical power. But don't always believe your young people when they praise you, because the things that they want to get out of a lesson are not necessarily the same things that we want them to get out of a lesson. So again, just a minute or so, come up with as many of your strengths as you can. I personally find this really hard. I'm going to kind of keep talking just whilst you brainstorm. I do find this really hard myself. I think identifying your own strengths is difficult. I think for most people, it's difficult, which is why we have that tendency, don't we, to rely on what other people tell us. But sometimes your strengths are things like your own resilience. They're the fact that you really, really don't get on with your year 9 class, but you're able to disguise that. They don't know that you don't get on with them. They don't know that you see them on your timetable and you dread that day. Maybe your strengths are that you do seek out CPD. Maybe you don't always get it. Maybe there isn't always the budget for it. Maybe sometimes you have to pay for it yourself. But you're good at finding your areas of improvement and actually working on them, as opposed to just finding them as a tick box exercise. Maybe your strength is that you actually really like playground duty. Maybe you like the opportunity to go out and play football with the year 7 lads every morning. And so one of the things that you are able to do to help your colleagues out is offer to take their playground duty for them, because you don't mind going out and doing it and they've got a lot to do. Maybe one of your strengths is that you set boundaries. And you say, sorry, no, I can't do after school duty today because it's my PPA. And so I have my afternoon off. Your strengths are probably going to be tied to your values, because the things that we see as strengths within ourselves are things that we value, things that we know to be important. Okay, so hopefully you've come up with a nice long list of strengths right now. So we're going to move on to our growth areas. Now, if I were being very strict with this, I would say that what you need to do is take your number of strengths, divide it by 4, and that's the number of growth areas you should identify. Because if we're dividing by 4, then we know that we're going to come up with more strengths and growth areas, and so we're going to come out of this still feeling good about ourselves. If you divide it by 3, then you should, in theory, come out feeling neutral. What I'm actually going to say is make sure you come up with fewer growth areas than strengths. But your growth areas need to be important, because it's our areas of growth that we are going to situate our goals in, because it's our areas of growth that are important, that need to change. Now, your areas of growth don't have to be things that you're bad at. It doesn't have to be, oh, my mentor last year said that I'm not very good at stretching my year 12 high attainers, and so I need to go on a gifted and talented course. Your area for growth could be, I'm ready to take on a head of something position, a head of sixth form, a head of year, a head of department, and so I want to do the management training in order to get that, because I don't feel like I know what those roles entail. So the way that I've worded this is very, very important and is very, very deliberate, because we are looking for areas for growth and not weaknesses necessarily. Although, they may be the same thing. Facts Porcupine Podcast has texted in to say hello to you. You've popped an American flag in your message, so I'm going to guess if you are texting in from the States, it's somewhere between 2 and 5 a.m. for you. So thank you very much for tuning in to a goal setting workshop first thing in the morning. If I've got that wrong, and you've just chosen the US flag, or my eyes are failing me on my screen, and it's actually the Iberian flag, I think, is the one that looks a lot like the US flag, then please do forgive me. But it's really, really lovely to have you here this morning. We are doing a goal setting workshop, and we are thinking right now about our areas for career growth. So what is it that we need to improve? Oh, from New York. Perfect. So I think I'm in the UK. I think that puts you 5 hours behind me. So 5 a.m. A nice early start for you. Love it. Okay. Now that we have come up with some areas for growth, we're going to look back and we're going to look forward. We're going to channel our inner Janus, the Roman god of new beginnings, who had 2 faces, one on the front of his head, one on the back of his head, so that he could look back and forward at the same time. We are going to think about, first of all, going backwards. What is one area of my practice that I have improved in over the past year? We're going to think forwards. What is one area that I would like to focus on developing this specific year? And we're going to think about how that growth would benefit my young people, our young people. They don't have to benefit my young people specifically. They can benefit yours, I suppose. But if mine benefit, I would be very, very happy about that. But yeah, what is one area of your practice that you have improved over the past year? I think for me, if I'm very, very honest, it has been allowing my young people to take responsibility for themselves, not feeling like everything is on my shoulders. And to anybody who has listened to the show before, that might sound very ironic, because I talk a lot about the distinction between teaching and learning, and how we as the teachers only do half of the job because our young people have to do the other half. We do the teaching bit, they do the learning bit. And it was Tom, I think, on LinkedIn who did a really nice post about how we don't take ownership. We shouldn't take ownership over our young people's results. They're not our results, they are their results. And I agreed completely. And I've always believed that. But I still get the butterflies in my stomach I still get that sinking feeling on results day while I'm waiting for everything to come in, ready to blame myself when things go wrong and praise the kids when things go right. And the thing is, only one of those two responses is reasonable, the praising. Because as long as I have done my job properly, as long as, I think it was Esmeralda who said, as long as I have done everything in my power to prepare the young children, the young people, for that exam, the rest is on them. And I have finally, thanks to, I think, ironically, the results of my young people this year, realized that. Because this is my first year as a head of department, so it was the first year that I sat down and did actual full-on results analysis. And I could very easily map the results that my young people got to the effort that they put in, to the extras that they did, to their engagement with lessons. And there were very clear correlations. There were a couple of outliers. There were a couple of ambiguities that if I were to dig deeper into those particular students, probably would be identifiable. But for the most part, there was a very clear correlation between the two. And so I would say that one area of practice that I've improved in is understanding that and giving myself that grace, that it's not about me, getting over myself, getting over that ego. One area that I would like to focus on developing this year is, and this will come as no surprise to anybody that listens to the show, but it is actually in my doctoral studies. I want my big professional focus this year is on my Ed.D. And the reason for that is my doctorate is in language teaching and learning. So all of the reading that I do is about being a language teacher. It's about being a language learner. All of the symposia that I go to, all of the seminars that I go to, they're all about language teaching and learning. And so just by doing my doctorate, I am becoming a better teacher because I'm engaging with that literature. So by doing something for myself, because realistically, I'm the one that most benefits from becoming a Dr. Lester. That's going to be such a good day. I'm going to be insufferable on social media that day. I'm just warning you all now. But by doing that and by focusing on that, my young people will benefit because I am keeping up to date with the research, I'm keeping up to date with the practice, I'm keeping up to date with the pedagogy. There are also other ways that my practice will benefit from that. I've sat down this morning before the show and I've started planning TTR journal club for next year. And a lot of the articles that we are going to read in Journal Club are things I've been picking up for my doctorate. So again, as I've been saying a few times throughout this workshop, the goals that we pick as teachers don't have to be directly student-centric. They don't have to be all about the kids. Because as long as they are related to improving our teaching, the kids will benefit. So think about what it is that you want to achieve. Think about what it is that you want your career to look like. Think about what it is that you want to work on. Because whether deliberately or as a byproduct, our young people, your young people, will benefit from that.
Get a head start on your fresh start with Bloomsbury Education. With 30% off all our books till the end of September, this back-to-school sale is your chance to stock up on CPD titles, classroom resource banks, lesson ideas, and practical solutions to every teacher's pain points. Browse titles on sale from the Like a Ninja series, The Week Junior, and Let's Talk Picture Books. Perfect for the new school year. From leadership to inclusivity and maths to mental health, Bloomsbury Education has books for every step of your teaching journey. Welcome back to school at bloomsbury.com/back-to-school sale.
Over 7,500 primary schools are already using Kapow Primary to boost confidence in teaching foundation subjects. Our expert-created curriculum planning, lessons and CPD are here to support and upskill you, whether you're a subject lead or classroom teacher. If you've got knowledge gaps in art, music, computing or beyond, we've got you covered. Head to kapowprimary.com and empower your teaching today.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Don't miss out. Level up your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles.
Okay, we are 70 minutes into the show and we still have not actually set any goals yet. We've thought about things. We thought about what we want our career to look like. We thought about what our career currently does look like. We thought about that gap between the two and how we're going to bridge it. But that's kind of the point. Quite often when we set goals, we jump in head first and we come up with things that might be a bit arbitrary. We come up with things that we have put a little bit of thought into, but we've not really given the consideration that they need. And that's why we don't always achieve them. Because if your goals don't actually align with who you are as a teacher, who you are as a person, what you actually want to achieve, then they're just going to be put away in a drawer and forgotten about. So we have very deliberately spent a lot of time reflecting and planning and thinking and not very much time actually goal setting yet. Because realistically, when it comes to thinking about your goals, the actual setting of the goal is the least important thing. It's your why and your how that are the most important. And those are the things that are worth putting your time into. If you're working through the workbook this morning, we are now on page 15 and we are in vision and goal setting. This is section 2 now. So we're getting to the bit that a lot of you tuned in thinking we were probably going to do right from the beginning. But all of the legwork that we've done, all of the reflection, all of the thinking is going to make this next bit easier. But again, we're not going to jump into our goals just yet. I want you now to think about next summer, whenever that may be for you. So, we've got Facts Porcupine podcast in here from New York. I'm aware that in the US, their summers start much earlier than the UK summer does. So maybe your summer is going to start in May, late May, early June. Maybe if you are like me in the UK, your summer is going to start late July. My summer doesn't actually start at all because my school is a year-round school. So I'm going to think of my endpoint as being the last A-level or GCSE exam that my young people have to take. I don't quite know when that is yet, but that's going to be late June at the latest. So I want you to think about the end of whatever this period looks like for you. And I want you to pretend that you are reflecting back on it. I want you to pretend that you have had the best school year ever. And again, if you're not a teacher, if you are here because you work with young people and you're doing this exercise in your own career, again, think about whatever it is you want to accomplish, you want to have accomplished over the year. And I want you to write down what that looks like. And I want you to do it in the future perfect tense. I will have done something. Okay. I will have written 5 chapters of my novel. I will have, for me, it's going to be, I will have completed all of the interviews that I need to do for my thesis. That's my big goal. I need to interview 12 language teachers over the course of the year. And so by this time next year, I will have done that. I want you to think about what your classroom looks like, what your classroom feels like. I want you to think about what impact you have made on your young people. I want you to think about what improvements you have found in your own life. I want to know what all of those things look like for you. I want to know when we come back together next summer to reflect on this goal setting, I want to know what you're telling me has happened. Because if you can think about that, if you can envision that, if you can talk about that as if it has already happened, then again, psychologically, what that's going to do is make it feel more achievable to you. Quite often, when we set goals and when we talk about visions and that sort of thing, it all gets a bit esoteric, doesn't it? But it's not. Goal setting and using specific tenses when you are talking about things, it's all about convincing yourself. It's all about changing your own mindset to make these things seem easier for you. So if you are saying, by this time next year, I will have done, you are telling yourself that it's easy to do that. Now, of course, I'm a language teacher, so I'm going to be very biased about the power of language. But language is powerful. Language is important. And if we can use our language to convince other people of things, then we can use our language to convince ourselves of things as well. So by thinking as if you have already achieved these things, by thinking, how am I going to tell Darren next summer that I led my first overnight field trip to Austria? You are telling yourself that that's achievable, that it's practical, that it's doable. Okay, this is where we get to the big one then. Now that we have thought about where we started, right back at the beginning of our careers, where we are now, what that gap between our current self and our future self looks like, how we're going to cross that gap, how we're going to make sure that we have the best year ever, we can start thinking about what our goals actually are. And like I said about half an hour ago, the number 3, psychologically, linguistically, is very important. Now, again, I'm not being esoteric here. Okay, this is grounded in a lot of psychological research and a lot of linguistic research. So what I've suggested in the workbook is that you come up with 3 professional goals and 3 personal goals. And by now, because you have spent the last 80 minutes really thinking about who you are as a teacher, who you are as a person, where you have come from, where you want to go, it should feel easier, it should feel more natural to come up with something beneficial. Thank you, Facts Porcupine Podcast. It was lovely to have you here with us this morning. I have in the workbook included the SMART framework. Now, I know you're going to roll your eyes at me because it's always the SMART framework. It's a bit of a cliche these days, isn't it? But it's a cliche because it works. It's a cliche because it's true. Okay, so your goal must be specific. Your goal cannot be, I'm going to finish writing my book. Well, actually, no, to be fair, it could be. That is actually quite specific. Your goal cannot be, I'm going to write, because that's too vague. That doesn't mean anything. You can't measure that, which comes into the M, measurable. Goals work if you can measure them, because you can give yourself those smaller rewards. And again, we talk about this quite often disparagingly when we talk about our young people and their dopamine hits. You know, how they scroll TikTok, and it gives them that dopamine that they need, and that's what keeps them addicted. But dopamine, the reward system, praising yourself for doing something, it is necessary. It's part of our psychology. It is something that we need. And so by making your goals specific and measurable, it makes that rewarding easier. Now, what your reward is going to be is entirely up to you, because what might be a good reward for you may not be a good reward for me, and vice versa. Please be aware that I'm not telling you to bankrupt yourself. Please be aware that I'm not suggesting that you book yourself a 5-star hotel in Mauritius just because you've remembered to hand the register in 5 days in a row. Obviously, your reward must be practical, and it must work. It must be in scale, I suppose, with what you've achieved. If you've literally never handed your register in, ever, in 50 years of teaching, and you do it 5 days in a row, then maybe that might require a holiday to Mauritius. But I think for most of us, that would require a chocolate bar. Unless, of course, you are on some kind of weight loss journey, and that's one of your personal goals, in which case don't reward yourself with a chocolate bar, because that is counterproductive. Reward yourself with something else. I know, I'm aware that I'm now going into patronizing territory. You are adults, you can come up with your own reward system. But the reward system is important, because the reward system recognizes what you've done. I don't think it's the actual reward itself that is important, although it should be nice, it should be pleasant, it should be that book that you want. It should be, if you're a geeky millennial like me, it should be that vinyl figure that can go in your collection, whatever it's going to be. But that itself isn't the important thing. The important thing is recognizing the work that you've been doing. The important thing is that in order to give yourself the reward, you've got to check in with your goal. You've got to go back to your notebook that you've been keeping this whole workshop. You've got to go, you can go back to your Word document. You can look at it again and you can go, oh, I did that. And then that's going to make you want to carry on. Your goal has to be achievable. Okay, setting yourself a personal goal of having $1 million in the bank by this time next year, when you've got $4.99 in the bank right now, and your only job is teaching, and you don't do anything else to earn any kind of money, is not a good goal, because it's not achievable. And ultimately, that's what the achievability in SMART means, doesn't it? Is this a good goal? No, because I'm not going to do it. I'm setting myself up for failure. And why would you waste your time setting as a goal something that is never going to happen? I think there does need to be a bit of nuance around the difference between achievable and aspirational, and whether we should be going for aspirational goals if they are slightly out of reach. But even if they are slightly out of reach, they are probably still achievable. But let's be honest, if you're going to set a goal that isn't achievable, there is no point. So why do it? Why waste your time? They've got to be relevant. They've got to be relevant. So you are probably not going to put run a marathon in your professional goals, unless you're a PE teacher. I suppose if you're a PE teacher, that could be relevant. But for me, running a marathon, well, it would kill me to start with, but running a marathon has got nothing to do with teaching language. So I'm not going to put that in my goals. Now, I know somebody, a good friend of mine, a head of Spanish, who was an interpreter at the London Olympics. And that was like a huge deal, clearly. That could be a goal. And even though it's a personal thing, because being an interpreter at the London Olympics had really nothing to do with her being a head of Spanish, it was related to the fact that she is a Spanish teacher. She was interpreting in Spanish. She was practicing those interpreting skills, as well as being an amazing thing to do. So relevance doesn't have to mean confined to the classroom. It can be bigger. It just has to be related. But that's also why I think it's really important to have both professional and personal goals so that you're not conflating the two. And then finally, time bound. Because, again, it's not about putting deadlines on yourself. It's about making sure you can't string it out forever. Because what's the point of having a goal if you're not going to achieve it? So if your goal is, oh, I'm going to run a marathon, and that means that you need to download Couch to 5K, other running apps are available, because you haven't even got that far yet. If you don't say, I'm going to run a marathon next year, you could very easily not download that running app for another 6 months and just be like, oh, it's still my goal, but I got too busy. Because how often do we say that to ourselves and to each other? I'm too busy. There was too much to do. And so making a goal time bound is not about putting an arbitrary deadline on something. And it's not about pressuring yourself into doing it. It's about making sure that you don't string it out for the rest of your life. Because again, what is the point of a goal if you're not going to achieve it? Or if you're not going to attempt to achieve it? If you're just going to make excuses at every point. Time bound also means that you can reevaluate whether or not that goal is actually important to you. If your goal is to run, I don't know why I'm so fixated on running a marathon today, but clearly that's what I've got in my head. If your goal is to run a marathon and we come back to talk about this time next year, and you say to me, oh no, Darren, I didn't do anything. I didn't even get around to downloading the running app. But I will. My advice to you would probably be running a marathon is not that important to you. Because in the last entire year, you have done nothing to try and make it happen. Or maybe it is important. Maybe it is something that you want to do, but other things have taken priority, and that's okay. I remember this time last year thinking that because I'm now teaching in an online school, I would have loads of free time. And I remember speaking to very, very good friends of mine and making commitments that I feel really bad that I haven't acted on. You know, make commitments to see each other, to hang out a lot more, because I thought I would be able to. But what I have found is I've been using my time a lot more than I thought I would use it for my work. And that has been important to me. Doesn't mean that I haven't wanted to see my friends. Doesn't mean that I have intended to renege on those commitments. It has just been this other thing is also very important. And I didn't think it would be as important this time last year. So reflecting on the importance of things and keeping that importance in balance is really, really important. Now, if you downloaded the workbook, we are finally at the action planning stage, page 17, just as we are running out of time, just as we are coming to the end of the show. So the next stage in your goal setting is, to be fair, the stage that you don't need me for, and that is actually putting these goals on paper. But it's not just about writing them down, okay? Don't make this a to-do list. Keep thinking about why you want to do them. Keep thinking about what they are for. Keep thinking about the point. Think about the steps that you need to take. Think about the obstacles that could get in your way. If your goal is to hang out with your friends a lot more, an obstacle could be, I don't know how to balance my time between my work and my social life, because that then will give you something to watch out for. Think about supports that you can use, people, books, podcasts. Think about a timeline. Think about who is safe to share these goals with. You may not want to share the goals with everybody. You may not want to share your goals with anybody, because for some people, sharing a goal psychologically has the same impact as doing it. So if you tell somebody that you've done it, it's the same as actually doing it. So you may be the type of person who shouldn't share their goals. And again, that's why we've done 90 minutes of self-reflection, so that you know what kind of person you are. Think about the people that you can get support from. Think about how you're going to check in on your progress. And come up with 6 goals for yourself. 3 professional and 3 personal. And we're going to check in with this in January. I've already kind of planned out the shows for this academic year. And I think it's the 3rd of January is the first Saturday in 2026. We're going to check in again just to see how we did over the first term and what we need to do to get ourselves back on track. But don't wait until January to come back and listen to Saturday Breakfast. Please do join me again next week, when we will be talking about teacher identity, constructing that teacher identity, particularly if you're a new teacher. But again, as we have thought about today, it's always important to revisit who you are as a teacher. Thank you so much for joining me today. If you have taken anything away from this session, please do give me a like, do give us a follow, do give us a thumbs up, do all of that good stuff that makes me feel like I'm a full-time YouTuber. And I will see you next Saturday. Have a great first week back at school, everybody. Thank you very much, and goodbye.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.